Imagine this. Someone you love has been sick for days. You pray, you wait, you hope, but nothing happens. And then, the worst, they die. You're heartbroken. You feel abandoned. You wonder, why didn't God show up? Now imagine this. 4 days later, someone arrives, walks straight to the grave, and calls out their name. And then, before your very eyes, they come back to life. Sounds like something out of a movie, right? But this isn't fiction. This is the real story of Lazarus, one of the most powerful miracles in the Bible. But beyond the shock factor, this story raises deep questions about faith, doubt, suffering, and the meaning of life and death. Why did Jesus wait? What does this miracle actually mean? And what does it tell us about the way we see our own struggles? Stick around, because we're about to unpack the deeper truths behind this incredible moment. All right, let's start with the basics. Lazarus wasn't just some random guy. He was a close friend of Jesus. He lived in the village of Bethany with his two sisters, Mary and Martha. They were faithful believers, and they had seen Jesus perform miracles before. One day, Lazarus gets seriously sick. His sisters do what any of us would do in a crisis. They send for Jesus. Now, here's where things get strange. Jesus doesn't go right away. Think about that. If someone you loved was in trouble, wouldn't you drop everything to help? But instead, Jesus waits 2 more days before even starting the journey. And in that time, Lazarus dies. By the time Jesus arrives in Bethany, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. In Jewish tradition, this wasn't just death, this was final. There was a belief that a soul might linger for 3 days, but by the 4th, gone. No hope. So, when Jesus shows up, Martha runs to meet him, and you can hear the pain in her words. Lord, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. That's raw honesty. That's real heartbreak. And haven't we all felt that way at some point? God, if you really loved me, why didn't you stop this from happening? But Jesus looks at her and says something strange. Your brother will rise again. Martha, being practical, assumes he means in the future, on the final day of resurrection. But then Jesus drops a bombshell. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even though they die. Powerful words, but what do they actually mean? Now let's pause and think about this. Why did Jesus wait? If he had come earlier, he could have healed Lazarus before he died. That would have been a miracle too, right? But Jesus had something bigger in mind. He wasn't just here to heal a sick man. He was here to defeat death itself. This miracle wasn't just for Lazarus. It was a sign, a preview, a message that death is not the end. Now let's break down 3 major lessons this story teaches us. 1, God's timing isn't our timing. Martha and Mary wanted Jesus to come immediately, and when he didn't, it felt like he was ignoring them. But was he? No, he had a plan far beyond what they could see. And isn't that exactly how life sometimes feels? You pray for something, healing, a breakthrough, an answer, but nothing happens. You start wondering, did God forget about me? But here's the truth. Delays aren't denials. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean God isn't working. Sometimes he waits not because he doesn't care, but because he's preparing something greater. Number 2, faith is stronger than fear. Let's be honest, death's scary. Losing people's scary. And even in our everyday lives, we fear loss, failure, and uncertainty. But what does Jesus say? I am the resurrection and the life. He's not just talking about the future. He's saying right now, in the middle of your pain, I am your source of life. Faith isn't just about believing in heaven. It's about trusting that even now, in your darkest moments, God has power over everything, including the things that seem impossible. Number 3, Jesus cares about our pain. Now, this part gets me every time. Even though Jesus knew he was about to raise Lazarus from the dead, what did he do when he saw Mary weeping? He wept. I mean, think about that. The Son of God, who had power over life and death, cried with them. This tells us something huge. God isn't distant from our suffering. He doesn't look at our pain and say, don't worry, I have a plan, just be patient. No, he feels it. He enters into it. If you're struggling today, know this. God sees your pain, and he weeps with you. All right, now we're about to witness the turning point. The moment when everything changes. Up until now, the situation seemed hopeless. Lazarus was dead, and everyone around him, that meant it was too late. There was no way out. They had seen death. They had seen mourning. They had seen the finality of it all. But Jesus was about to turn that entire worldview upside down. Jesus arrives at the tomb, and it's clear that the people are grieving deeply. The stone has been rolled in front of the cave, and they've already sealed it, knowing that there's no coming back from death. The mourners are still weeping, and there's an overwhelming sense of loss. But Jesus, knowing what he's about to do, doesn't just jump straight into the miracle. First, he asks for the stone to be rolled away from the tomb. At this moment, Martha, Lazarus' sister, tries to stop him. She says, "But Lord, by this time there's a bad odor, for he's been in there for 4 days." She's thinking practically. Lazarus is beyond help, and now the body has started to decompose. The physical world, in her eyes, has already pronounced the situation over. But Jesus doesn't let the reality of death define what's possible. He says to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" Jesus isn't just talking about belief in some abstract sense. He's talking about a belief that activates something greater than the natural world, a belief that unlocks the supernatural. It's about trusting that when God says something will happen, even when all evidence points to the contrary, His word is greater than the laws of nature. Now Martha steps aside and the stone is rolled away. There's no going back now. It's happening. The stage is set for a miracle. Jesus doesn't rush into the tomb or begin laying hands on Lazarus. He doesn't have to. Instead, he lifts his eyes to heaven and prays, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." In this prayer, Jesus is confirming his intimate relationship with God the Father. He's saying, "I don't have to prove my power, but I want these people to see that I'm not just a healer. I'm the Son of God, and I have authority to raise the dead." Then, with the crowd watching in stunned silence, Jesus commands, "Lazarus, come out." These 3 simple words changed everything. And then the impossible happens. Lazarus, still wrapped in burial cloths, begins to move. He comes walking out of the tomb, alive, breathing, and whole. He's not just spiritually revived, his physical body, which was supposed to be decaying, is completely restored. Can you imagine the shock on the faces of the onlookers? Can you feel the silence, followed by the gasp of disbelief as they watch Lazarus stumble out of the tomb? It's as if time stops for a moment and all the laws of nature are temporarily suspended. The moment of resurrection was the ultimate proof of Jesus' power over death, the most final and irreversible force we face in life. And it was a direct statement that God has the authority to change even the most hopeless situations. Jesus didn't just raise Lazarus for the sake of performing a miracle. This event was a foreshadowing of something much bigger, Jesus' own death and resurrection. At this point, Jesus was only a few weeks away from his own crucifixion. And in raising Lazarus, he was given a living picture of what was going to happen on a much grander scale when he himself would be placed in a tomb. Lazarus' resurrection was a preview, a promise that death is not the final word. Just as Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb, he would soon rise from his own death. The miracle of Lazarus becoming a living illustration of the eternal hope believers have in Jesus. This moment is one of the most defining in the Bible because it speaks to Jesus' ultimate authority over all things, even death itself. Lazarus was physically dead, and Jesus knew that no one could bring him back except for the Creator of life. So what does this story actually mean for you and me? Life is more than what we see. This world isn't the end. Death isn't the final chapter. There's something greater beyond it. Even when it feels like God's late, He's always on time. If you're waiting for a breakthrough, don't lose hope. God's delays have a purpose. You are never alone in your suffering. Jesus weeps with you. He understands your pain, and He walks with you through it. Most importantly, there's no situation too dead for God to revive. Maybe it's a broken relationship, a lost dream, or a life that feels stuck. But if God can call a dead man out of his grave, He can breathe life into your situation too. So here's the big question. Where do you see yourself in this story? Are you like Martha, struggling to trust God's timing? Or are you like Mary, who's overwhelmed by grief or confusion? Or maybe you feel like Lazarus, trapped in something that feels impossible to escape. Whatever you are, remember this: Jesus is still calling people out of the grave. And if he's calling your name, don't stay in the dark. Step into the light, because life, real abundant life, is waiting. If this message spoke to you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And let me know in the comments what part of this story impacted you the most. See you in the next video. Stay strong, stay faithful, and remember, life always wins.